Good evening, everybody. It's Steve of Real Progressives. Last night, midnight, I gave you guys a little bit of a preview of what my intentions were for tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood facets of the American economy and one of the perpetual myths that still reigns supreme within the Democratic Party and largely amongst people who still have some sort of a misconception that Bill Clinton was like a really good president. But it really comes down to how did all these things start happening? You know, we were going through this Goldilocks economy during the Clinton era. We had the dot-com era, if you will, before the bust. A lot of things happened. A lot of people were able to do a lot of things that felt really good. Housing values were going through the roof. Overnight paper millionaires investing in dot-coms, you name it, venture capital flying everywhere. How is it possible that such a phenomenal economy, could have been the beginning of the end for so much of what it is that we as a nation are going through today and what set the stage for the great financial crisis and largely was, barely kept on fumes through the Bush era. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an article, at least parts of an article. This is from Business Insider. And Business Insider, had a thing about how the Clinton surplus destroyed the American economy. Needless to say, the reason why this article is making it to the broadcast tonight is because Dr. Stephanie Kelton is peppered throughout the entire thing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the article up to read along with you guys. Just give me a moment. We'll go ahead and get this thing up here. And so this is called The Untold Story of How Clinton's Budget Destroyed the American Economy. Now, of course, it's important to understand that Democrats, in particular, maybe more than anyone, fall in love with their presidents. They defend blue, they vote blue, they wear these funny styrofoam pork pie hats. They cry when Hillary doesn't get the nomination or doesn't get the, doesn't win. They, see a lot of weirdness in the Democratic Party. And they're very, very loyal in spite of facts. Doesn't matter how many facts you throw at them. They still hold on to ideas of Obama's greatness. I mean, you look around, there's still people out there with Obama's picture as their poster child or their profile picture, which is really kind of laughable when you understand. But let's go ahead and start with this article here. And the link is in the narrative for those of you who are interested. It starts off, Bill Clinton is giving the keynote speech at the Democratic Convention tonight. Obviously, this is a few years back. The idea is to make people feel nostalgic for the last time when the economy was really booming and hope that some of that rubs off on Obama. However, in the New York Post, Charlie Gasparino uses the occasion to remind everyone that the seeds of our current economic malaise were planted during the Clinton years. Basically, it was under Clinton that Fannie and Freddie really began blowing the housing bubble, issuing epic amounts of mortgage-backed debt. The story that Gasparino tells is basically liberal Bill Clinton thought he could use government to make everyone a homeowner, and so naturally this ended in disaster. Well, anyway, all this stuff right here, notwithstanding, the Clinton legacy is, in addition to being remembered for a strong economy, Bill Clinton is remembered as the last president to preside over balanced budgets. Given the salience of the national debt issue in the American politics today, the surpluses are a major mark of pride for former president and arguably the entire country. They shouldn't be. I think it's safe to say that we are still suffering the harmful effects of the Clinton budget surpluses, says Stephanie Kelton, an economics professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, now at Stony Brook. To understand why, you first need to understand that the components of GDP look like this. GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. In the above equation, C is private consumption spending, I is investment spending, G is government spending, and the X minus M is exports minus imports, essentially the trade surplus. Here is a chart. And so they go through all this stuff and show these charts. And I'm going to skip past some of the stuff because it'll bore you to tears. You can read this on your own time. But we're going to get down to this key thing right here. And this is maybe the most important part here. It says, so you can already see how the crisis started to germinate under Clinton. As his trade and budget policies became a drag on the economy, households spent and went into debt like never before. Folks, let's talk about that for 2 seconds. We'll come right back to it. When you think about private debt is brought on largely, the immense private debt is brought on largely by neoliberalism. This is neoliberalism. It is the cutting off of fiscal policy, aka the programs that we love, like Medicare for all, welfare, whatever it is that we as a nation need to survive. So what they do is they cut the spigot off and they push us to desperation loans. We go out there, or we go ahead and take on more debt than we can because of predatory lending. Anyone remember getting those 100% mortgages? I do. Anyway, let's get back to the story here real quick. So economist Stephanie Kelton expounded further in an email to Business Insider. Folks, you're going to love this. Now, you might ask, what's the matter with a negative private sector balance? We had that during the Clinton boom, and we had low inflation, decent growth, and very low unemployment. The Goldilocks economy, as it was known, the great moderation. Again, few economists saw what was happening with any degree of clarity. My colleagues at the Levy Institute were not fooled. Wynne Godley wrote brilliant stuff during this period, while the CBO was predicting surpluses as far as the eye can see, 15 plus years in their forecasts. Wynne said it would never happen. He knew it couldn't because the government could only run surpluses for 15 plus years if the domestic private sector ran deficits for 15 plus years. In other words, folks, you and I, the CBO had it all wrong. And they had it all wrong because they did not understand the implications of their forecast for the rest of the economy. The private sector cannot survive in negative territory. It cannot go on year after year spending more than its income. Not the government, the freaking private sector, that's you and I. It's not like the U.S. government. It cannot support rising indebtedness in perpetuity. It is not a currency issuer. Eventually, something will give. And when it does, the private sector will retrench, the economy will contract, and the government's budget will move back into deficit. But this is only part of the story. And anyway, so I'm going to skip past the rest of this, and I'm just going to get back to, my point here. And this is so vital, so vital. I don't care. You know what? We have people on our team at Real Progressives who live and die for Bernie Sanders. I love Bernie, or I loved him anyway, like I used to, and I love him now. But people that really love Bernie Sanders, and it's very hard for them to hear critique about Bernie Sanders. But Bernie Sanders talks about having to reduce the deficit. That is us. That's reducing our income, your and my income. It's bad economics. And you hear it in particular from Hillbots. And you hear it in particular from worthless publications like Occupy Democrats. And you hear it from people like Bobby Reich, who people genuinely love. The little munchkin, they love the guy to death. But he is just ridiculously wrong. When you reduce the deficit as a nation, that makes its bread and butter importing goods and services from the rest of the world, which is fine. It's okay to be a net importer. What is not okay is to then cut off federal spending, which keeps the economy going. When you've got more money leaving the economy than you do being made in the economy, and then you don't fill it back up with federal spending, aka deficit spending, we need to run deficits, big deficits, every single year. We are a net importer. Every year we are a net importer. We must run deficits in excess of not only the trade. Where do we fit here? Are we a net importer? Are we a net exporter? Well, we are decidedly a net importer. So we've got to at least meet the level of net importing, or we are screwed. Then every time you and I decide it's time to save some money, let's say we decide we're going to put it in a CD. Let's say we decide we're going to sock it away in a 401k plan. Let's say we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw it into some treasury bond or security. That money is taken out of the economy, and it is called a demand leakage. So you have to offset the natural instinct for people to save money. And you have to offset the trade deficit. So now that you see how this plays out, think about how many times you've heard Bernie or Jill or any of these other politicians out there that you know and love talk about having to reduce the deficit. Think about what I'm saying for a minute. It should be an alarm clock to every one of you how vital it is that anyone says that we need to reduce the deficit has literally put your and my well-being in the back seat for political expediency. That is no joke. So let's go to the Clintons one more time. This is an important thing we're going to show here. Many of you have probably seen this before, so I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. Let's go ahead and take a peek at this. For those of you who need reminding of the glory days, i.e. Clinton surpluses, were both on the backs of unprecedented private sector deficits. Do you understand this? Does this make sense? Holler if you understand what they're saying here. Let me know that you understand what I'm saying here. In double entry accounting, you either you have an asset and you have a corresponding liability. So if the government is in deficit, somebody else is in surplus. And if the government is in surplus, that means the private sector is in deficit. Does this make sense? This should make sense. So I'm hoping that this image right here, this is a graph that shows all the different crises that occurred, in particular, the great financial crisis. And because you start to understand the way sectoral balances work, once you understand that we have three sectors we monitor, three sectors, the foreign sector, which we could also throw in demand leakages for savings and offshoring money and trade and so forth. Then you have the private sector. That's you and I going and getting some sort of a loan for student loans, or maybe a loan for a house or a car or any number of things. And then the last thing is public debt. This is a very vital point. And I try my best, and I don't do a great job, folks. I'm just going to be honest with you. I try my best to be patient with people. And as some of you know, it's funny to see how people describe me, even friends. They say, well, you've got Joe Firestone. He's the measured teacher. He's always a gentleman. And then you got Ellis. He's quick-witted, and he's this, that, and the other. And then you got Steve. If you want an explosive activist, there's Steve. It's like, all right, I'll take that. But I try to be patient about this. Let's talk about it. China, England, Australia, et cetera, all these countries, they have their own unit of account, their own sovereign currency. Russia, right? So when they buy goods and services in the US, they sell their products there. And because they don't use US dollars in Russia per se, or in China, I mean, they do some, but really in fairness, they don't use it. They'll leave that money parked at the Fed. And that money sits there to handle any trade back and forth, any investments they want to make in the United States, any sales, purchases, whatever. Well, what happens? The United States government has a mandate that when we deficit spend, that we sell treasuries to offset the spending. Whenever we spend, we sell treasuries to offset that spending. Remember, double entry accounting. We're not talking about real debt here, because the only way that a country or a person or anyone else can buy a US treasury is using their existing US dollars. So what the government does is they try to pull money out of the economy, another demand leakage. Remember, this is part of that sectoral balances model. They pull the money out of the economy and they put it into a treasury. And that treasury is basically taking their money and put it on the sidelines for 6 months, a year, 3 months, whatever the time stamp is for that treasury sale. Okay? Now, China needs to buy some cars or some steel or some slate or whatever it is from the United States. They take their money in there and they use that to facilitate trade. And then on the back end, they just make it in yuan. They turned it into yuan through the exchange process, okay? So over here, they've got their own sovereign currency. Over here, they use US dollars in the US economy. All right, now what happens? That's the US debt. They buy a treasury bond with their money. With their money, they buy a treasury bond. They didn't borrow $10 million. They put $10 million in to buy treasuries and then earned a small bit of interest on those treasuries, taking it out of the economy. The bonus for them taking that money out of the economy was a small interest rate. Well, in their case, they do it because what else are they going to do with their money? They need to have a place to put it, right? Why sit there and let it just not collect interest? So they buy treasuries. Makes sense, right? It should make sense unless you just don't get any of this stuff. So the national debt, all this stuff, you got the Clintons, you got the Bushes, you got the Rand Pauls, you got every freakazoid that listens to weird stuff talking about it, right? The Pete Peterson Foundation, every freaking crooked politician, you name it, they all say, even the ones you love say this stuff. But all the debt is these guys took their existing dollars. They didn't take money and buy debt. No, they took their existing dollars and dumped them into a small interest-bearing account. This is the debt. This is the fear porn. This is the stuff that should make you turn your rage and anger at every single politician that says it, including Bernie, including Jill, including any single politician that ever says it. That is the thing they're making you fear. That stupid savings account is what they're making you fear. So when Bill Clinton reduced the deficit, they cut spending by eliminating much of the welfare that was, they made a 5-year lifetime max. They eliminated so many things. They made government efficient. They did all this stuff. And what did they do? By cutting spending, they literally made the bathtub of the economy dry up. Well, you don't feel it immediately, do you? It takes a little bit of time because people are going in private credit, going and driving up the housing market, creating bubbles. Because what happens is you and I can only go in debt so far, correct? We don't create the currency, right? Like Dr. Kelton said, we don't create the currency. The US government creates the currency. Now, what neoliberalism does and what the Clintons did directly to you and I, was they pushed us to support their Wall Street buddies by making us go into private debt to support the economy that the government stopped trying to make work. Okay? So now all of a sudden, you and I have $500,000 mortgages when we make $15 an hour. All of a sudden, we've got $200,000 worth of student debt because, damn, man, everybody's making money now. Let's go for it. Okay? Everybody started, hey, that's a neat car over there. It's only 1% interest. I'm going to go get it. I don't have all that much money. Oh, spend now. You'll be thankful later. And this is neoliberalism. They pushed you and I to go into consumer steroids and friggin' jack up our credit. And then what happened? They had already cut the federal spending. Now you and I had no more available credit. We were tapped out on credit cards. We were tapped out on student loans, tapped out on a max mansion, tapped out on everything, on vacations, you name it. We had been tapped out. And all of a sudden, the housing market blew. It bubble burst and went wham, gone, done. So what happens? What do Democrats do? The economy goes into recession as soon as Bush takes office. Bush hadn't even enacted a single policy. Bush is a son of a bitch. Don't let anybody tell you differently. But we do economics here. We don't do party politics. And we crush the soul of anyone that lies about this. Anyone that says, oh, Bush put unfunded wars on the government credit card. Those people deserve the elbow of truth right on the bridge of their nose. They deserve that little cast they put on the nose for breaking it and the black eyes that come from it. Like, you know, in A Fish Called Wanda, when the guy had the stuff shoved up his nose. That's what the people that say that deserve, because they are freaking they are destroying us. And they exist today and they keep it up. These hillbots, these vote blue sycophants that still celebrate Bill Clinton. So what happens? W does what all good Republicans do. They start trying to cut taxes, right? And they start trying to rev the war machine up, because the war machine will always save you from a recession, because we dump money into the war machine and it starts cranking. And all of a sudden, all those government contracts, all those military contracts, all those people, you and I, your neighbors, your next door neighbors, maybe your kids, maybe you got a job working for a defense contractor. Maybe you were just pushing paper. Maybe you were out there designing a bomb. I don't know. Whatever it was, they said, we got to get out of this hole Brother Bill put us in. So let's go to war. Well, needless to say, Democrats, too dumb for their own good, decided they'd blame Bush for the economy. Now, Bush did a lot of bad things, but the economy he inherited came as a direct result of Brother Bill trying to prove his conservative credentials. He's trying to prove that he could build a bridge to a new tomorrow, and he felt our pain. Bubba was really good at doing these sorts of things. While he was going ahead and playing with cigars in the blue dress, Bubba was also busy cutting our economy down to a nub. Flash forward to W. W had no answers for anything because W was a neocon. So what does W do? He builds the Department of Homeland Security as stimulus. There's spending right there. Let's build Department of Homeland Security. So all of a sudden now we got this whole big monster agency. The NSA is growing out of control. All this stuff, because that right there, along the lines of fascism, along the lines of monitoring us and everything else, it also was the boom that kept the economy from completely tanking. But they couldn't fucking help it, because the goddamn mortgage crisis was right there barreling down on us. And boom, right as Bush is leaving, Obama comes in, the great financial crisis. We all know about the Big Short. We all know about all that good stuff. Okay? Obama comes in with a stimulus of $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Didn't even come close to actually hitting 1 trillion. Most of the jobs he was putting out there were not shovel ready. And more importantly, and this might be the biggest thing, right now, we've got better than $2 trillion in policy space available to us a year. Deficit spending, $2 trillion a year. He gave us a meager $1 trillion, and the Tea Party came sweeping in, racist sons of bitches, and they started attacking federal spending. They were pushing for lean and mean, and the fucking recovery shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank. It took years. We have been in a perpetual recession throughout the entire Obama era. And reality, you may think that everything was okay, but what happens is this. When we hit these recessions, what happens? They make our standard of living drop. The wealthy, they stay wealthy. And then we have to borrow money again. We have to take lesser jobs. We end up having to foreclose on our home, and some opportunist with cash comes sweeping in and buys it right out from under us. My friends, here we are today, right now, as we speak. Right now, as we speak. And we've got a situation where the Republicans are offering up deficit spending suddenly, out of nowhere. Now, it's not the right deficit spending, for sure, but they are. And so here's a great quote by Kelton. Republicans have declared that it's okay to add to the deficit, and it is. Dems should take the gift and fight for better use of deficits. Now, folks, look at this for a minute and think about this. If you haven't learned anything from me at all, if you haven't learned anything from real progressives and all the people that have come through here, once you learn MMT, your whole idea of Democrat Republican looks silly. You start laughing in the face of the people that want to keep that little game going, that tic-tac-toe game going. You realize it's stupid. You realize it's worthless. It's a lie, right? You realize ultimately that if you just block the noise out, and that's what we do, and God love it, it pisses people off when we block out noise. They're like, what are you, a Republican? No. What are you, a Democrat? No. What are you, a Green? No. We are real progressives. But more importantly, we're economically literate. That's kind of how we roll. We're economically literate with progressive values. So we take your progressive dreams and agendas and we say, we can make the whole thing happen. And we can. But the Democrats come out because this is how they go. They vote blue sycophant, supports vote blue no matter who. And they will sit there and listen to some jackass talk about raising taxes to pay for stuff. And I'm not joking. I have been kicked out of Bernie groups. Bernie supporter here, kicked out of Bernie groups because I didn't kiss the ring. Because I talked about Stephanie Kelton and not Bernie. Bernie says what people that don't know economics need to hear. Stephanie Kelton says the truth. If that hurts your feelings, I'm so sorry. But truth reigns supreme here. And that's the way it has to be. Because you can't solve a problem with lies, no matter how well-intentioned. No matter how well-intentioned, you cannot solve a problem with a lie. You might band-aid it. You might push the day when you have to deal with it off. But that's what this country has been doing forever, is pushing the day of reckoning off over and over and over again. And folks, I say this with no joy and no malice. I say this as somebody who has children and desperately wants them to inherit a better earth and a better world and a better country than what our parents gave us. Our parents obviously didn't care enough or didn't know enough or didn't try hard enough or whatever enough to stop neoliberalism in its tracks. And their parents obviously were pretty terrible at it too. Because for the last 40 years, Milton Friedman and his desire to privatize everything stopped fiscal space, in other words, government spending, in its tracks. He stopped it dead in its tracks. And he said, you guys, us guys, can go into private debt to sustain the economy when it crashes. And then The government doesn't do it. The market handles that, right? The free markets handle that. And that keeps inflation down. So how many bozos, how many people within our quote unquote movement run around talking about quantity theory, okay, talking about, oh, you got so much money in the economy, what are you going to do, just print more money? How many folks have heard somebody say that? Folks, you got to move past those people. They're not helping us at all. They're not. They're going to have to get on the train, or you got to leave them behind. No joke. It's time. We don't have time to wait for them to figure this shit out. We got to keep moving. Don't get me wrong. Keep teaching. Talk to them. Always talk to them. Always teach. But do not wait for them to sign on before you force your elected representatives to do the right thing. I'm telling you, we got folks that support Bernie blindly. Blindly. Worship the ground he walks on blindly. And I love him, but he is wrong when he talks about this stuff. Now, he may be trying desperately to find a way to say things that are palatable to the masses, because look how many people out there still wax poetic about the petrodollar. Look how many people don't understand basics of what the Federal Reserve even does. Look how many people talk boldly about the Federal Reserve and the Rothschilds. Look at that. They couldn't tell you 1 minute what the Federal Reserve does, but by God's Loki be gone. They will talk to you about this stuff as if you've never heard it before. They'll act like they're the first time telling you, have you ever heard of the Lord Jesus Christ? Let me tell you about the Federal Reserve. And I'm telling you, folks, this is the stuff that has no bearing. You know what? Let me tell you about the Pony Express. Well, the government did it back in the 1800s. What are you talking about? Of course the Pony Express matters today. Eyes roll back in your head so far you see your brains, right? I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that gets in our way. And this goes back to the Clinton era, right? Nobody understood what was going on. Hell, the freaking TV didn't know what was going on. Your teachers in college didn't know what was going on. Paul Krugman made a career out of telling you the wrong thing. Bobby Reich does these great videos. And he's cute and adorable, and he's small, and he's cherubic, and you just want to cuddle him like a baby, swaddle him up and pat him and give him a bottle. But the reality is, he knows about trickle down. That's good. That's very good. But what he also talks about is taxes paying for things. What he also does is sit there and paint the lie that somehow or another we're broke, and if we don't cut spending here, we're going to go broke there, when he doesn't ever tell you about sectoral balances. This is a fact. This is a scientific fact. This is not some theory. This is the ebbs and flows. And well, Steve, that works all fine and well in a closed economy, mind you. But what about the global economy, Steve? You don't ever talk about that. Liar! Of course we do. I just did. Sectoral balances. What does that include? That includes the foreign sector. That's one of 3 sectors, and we very much focus on it. So when people say that, it makes you kind of dislike them a little bit for not paying attention, right? For thinking they know something, but maybe they don't. Maybe. Muy poquito. Just a wee bit. Yeah, abso-frickin-lutely. And then all of a sudden they say, well, the government can't create value with money. Well, of course it can. It puts a tax on it. The dollar is worth exactly what it's paid for in taxes. That's it. That's how they establish it. Period. Period. So let's get back to the Clintons again. We're getting ready to have Hillary be crowned Queen of England, Queen of the US, Queen of the world, okay? It didn't happen, did it? Didn't happen. But she was really keen on letting you know that Brother Bill was going to run her economy for her. She thought that was double plus good. Well, Bill Clinton already showed us what he does. He is a neoliberal, for real, the real deal neoliberal. The actual godfather of neoliberalism, man. This guy was a neoliberal on steroids. And this, my friends, I had Democrats telling me, Steve, we need Hillary. She knows how to work with Wall Street. Steve, we need Hillary. She knows how to run the military. Steve, we need Hillary because she's been training for this the whole time. What are you, a misogynist? What, do you hate women, Steve? No, I hate economic illiteracy more than anything on the planet. Here's a funny story. Guy sitting there with a gun aimed at like some dude, and somebody over here talking neoliberalism. Who do I save? Oh my God, I don't know. I mean, the person talking bad economics is killing more people than that one guy with that one gun, right? I mean, seriously, how many people have to die from neoliberalism? How many? Think about how many people died because of the Clintons cutting welfare. Just that alone. How many people had to do bad things, to deal drugs, to freaking run in illicit markets just so that they could survive? How many people in Baltimore's mean streets that died from murder? How many of them died because of the Clintons? How many super predators died because of the Clintons? Folks, this is not a joke. And this is why when you see Occupy Democrats and you see the other vote blue sycophants and the other people, I'm a proud Democrat. I'm really very proud to be a Democrat. I'm so proud. When you see that, and you see that the dull stares, like the shark eyes, that dull black look, and you ask them if they understand this, they're like, well, Bill Clinton, of course he ran a great economy. What are you, some Republican? You're a Republican? This is the deal, folks. And so here we go. Everything I just told you, we're coming up to 2018. And guess what jackasses are saying to me? Hey, Steve, isn't it more important that we unite around the things we agree on? Wouldn't it be great if we all agreed on the environment? Yeah, aces. Wouldn't it be great if we all agreed on ending wars? Hell yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we agreed on Medicare? Oh yeah. How about student loans? Better believe it. How are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to raise taxes, Steve. We're going to cut spending over here, the things we don't like. We're going to cut some spending. We're going to try and get the government back to surplus because that's a good thing to do. Think about Cenk Unger talking about how the Clintons handed Bush a surplus. What does that mean? The Clintons handed Bush an economy that was completely devoid of money running through it. They had cut so close to the bone that even W had no choice. He was screwed. The jackass was screwed. But these assholes, these sorry sons of bitches running around telling everybody that the Clintons handed Bush a fucking surplus. That Bush put wars on the government credit card. Look, folks, it's good to hate war. I despise war. But let's never allow another person to ever tell a lie again. That somehow or another the taxpayer dollar did this. That somehow or another this was a result of putting on a government credit card. The government creates its own fucking currency. Stop saying worthless things. When you hear Obama say, what are they going to do? Take out a credit card from the People's Bank of China? The man was a liar. So what do you do with that? Do you celebrate it? Do you vote blue anyway? Vote blue no matter who. Or do you say, to hell with that motherfucker? My kids deserve better than your idea of uniting just for the hell of it. My kids deserve a hell of a lot better than that moronic, low-life view of the world. They deserve a hell of a lot better. And so do your kids. Your kids deserve better than those parasites that tell you to just unite. We got to unite. And then all of a sudden you elect a bunch of dipshits that think it's good to reduce the deficit because you didn't feel comfortable talking to your elected representatives and demand that they forsake any talk of reducing the deficit. You didn't feel comfortable telling your friends on Facebook that reducing the deficit was moronic. Americans for Bernie Sanders had a meme, and I kid you not, it had me so angry I could have spit nails. And it said, how's Bernie going to pay for it? I'll tell you how he's going to pay for it. Bernie's going to tax the rich. Folks, tax the rich because you want to get income inequality down. Tax the rich because they're too goddamn rich. Tax them because they didn't earn the money. They friggin' lucked into it, whatever. But you're not taxing them to pay for not one single fucking program. Not one. Tax them because you don't like them. That's stupid. Whatever gets your rocks off. But don't you dare put that idea ahead of the idea of giving us a new deal to fill the tub of the economy. You see, once you realize we don't need rich people money to survive and win, once you realize that they are irrelevant, you start making different decisions. You start trying to lift the bottom instead of trying to tear down the top. You start lifting the bottom. You start focusing your efforts on the 99%, and you just focus. And you don't allow a loser to fucking make you focus upward. Because once we render them irrelevant and we make the world good for us, then we all rise up and we go after them and we take them down. That's right, we take them down. But in the meantime, stop making people die while you fight these wars. Now, I want to tell you something. This is very important so you understand my world perspective. I'm a project manager by trade. I'm a program manager by trade. That means that I look at what they call the critical path. I measure things in the triple constraint model: time, quality, and cost. So when I look at any proposal anybody puts out there, I'm asking, how long is it going to take for that to come to fruition? You want to tear down the system? Guess what? You need to put a timeline together for me and show me the steps you're taking to get there. Oh, it's not just, let's do this. No, you got to tell me how it's going to be done. That's right. We got to assign action items. We got to know milestones. We got to friggin' have a plan. And so when you tell me you're going to end the Fed and you're going to do all these things, you better show me a fucking timeline on how you're getting there. You can't do that, I'm done. I'm all about making shit happen. I'm all about delivering. I'm all about executing, and I'm all about making the fucking world better. So if you're not going to tell me how you get there, then you need to scoot the fuck over, lead, follow, or get the fuck out of my way. The timeline. Tell me your timeline. Let's look at the planning phase. Let's look at the fucking design phase. Let's look at the fucking build phase, and let's look at execution and testing. Okay? I need to see an end-to-end plan. I need to know where you're going. And if you can't tell me, if you think that taxes are paying for shit, you're just as bad as the goddamn Clintons. Don't tell me you're any better. You're not. You may be a nicer person. You may not be killing people in the traditional Clinton way. But you are by creating an austere environment, this fiscal conservatism. So we look and we say, 2018's coming. Tell me who your candidates are that actually understand economics. Tell me. Tim Canova? Okay. There's a few others, but not many. Why is that? I'll tell you why that is. the constituency still wants them to reduce deficits. The constituency doesn't fucking know economics. The constituency is going to cock-block green energy. They're going to cock-block student debt relief, and they're going to cock-block a job guarantee. They're going to cock-block a Green New Deal because they don't know any better. They're going to demand one, but they're going to stop you short when it comes to how to pay for it. When they talk about fight for 12 and fight for 15, do you know why they do that? Sloganeering works for the slow-minded, but guess what else? It's because they don't know that they can do better. It's because they don't think about a job guarantee. No, they go over to a subsistence wage with a UBI. They jump over here and they ignore economic reality because they don't care to learn. They just want easy. And so, our next batch of politicians in 2018, how many of them actually know how to end the Clinton era, the neoliberalism era that's still heavy on our lives? How many of them how many people that are running actually know what it means to end neoliberalism? I can guarantee you, God love them, scarce few. Ro Khanna, for all his warts and Silicon Valley money, he's a guy that's starting to learn. The Green Party, there are people over there fighting tooth and nail to wake up the other craze that are freaking thinking other weird thoughts. And they are shaking the tree with an internal push to educate economics so that the Green New Deal can come to fruition, so they can be relevant. But they're not there yet. They're not fighting in that way. They're still fighting back. They're still talking about the Rothschilds, and they're still talking about fractional reserve systems that don't work, don't exist, nothing. Haven't existed since 1933. And Democrats are just running around with their styrofoam red, white, and blue hats going, I love being a Democrat. It's so fun. Tea and crumpets? Sure. Republicans are going to eat our lunch all day long. Even if we win, we lose. Because then who do we have to blame? Who do we have to blame when the 2018 crop votes for reducing the deficit? Who do we have to blame when the 2018 crop decides that we got to focus on eliminating the national debt? You know, those savings accounts we talked about. When they go ahead and cut spending over here and all of a sudden we end up with a surplus. Or what happens when they go along without realizing it? You know, how many people don't know that the UBI was brought on by right-wing, ultra-right-wing crazy man, Milton Friedman? Most don't even realize it. But those of us who do our homework, we realize it. But here you go. The Koch brothers want to have a constitutional convention. The Koch brothers are working night and day to try and get states to sign on, the state houses to sign on to a constitutional convention, not to be confused with the state constitutional convention of New York City or New York. A national con, okay? And guess what? There's a Democrat down in Florida who's pushing for a balanced budget amendment. People like Dennis Kucinich were on the line for a balanced budget amendment. The Green Party used to push for a balanced budget amendment. The Democrats, many of them, Sherrod Brown even, pushing for a balanced budget amendment. In other words, taking us back to Clinton-era austerity. If you think that this is just some joke, if you think that this is something just not to pay attention to, if you would rather listen to people talking about the Rothschilds all day, if that satisfies your fix for knowledge, then this is going to bore the hell out of you. But it's going to impact you regardless. Folks, if these politicians, this next crop, is not educated, it's up to each of us to make sure they are educated. And when I hear people say, well, it's just a theory. What you're talking about, Steve, it's just a theory. First of all, fuck you. It's not just a theory. It's a bad marketing name that stuck from a Billy blog from Bill Mitchell's column. Years and years ago, it was dubbed the modern monetary theory, and it stuck. It used to be called Mosler economics. Some call it functional finance through Abba Lerner. The reality is this stuff's been around for a long time. Post-Keynesians are very, very in line with MMT. They're not perfect. They still screw some things up, but they're pretty close. But here we go. It's up to us to teach them. It's up to us to ensure that 2020, whoever runs for president, is well-versed. Folks, you need to go to Jimmy Dore, demand he addresses MMT. I hear he's going to do it. We'll see. You need to go to Draft Bernie and tell those folks, friends of mine, good people, hey guys, if you're building the People's Party, stop pretending that this is just a theory and freaking start making it happen. The smart kids in the room with Stephanie Kelton and gang have already laid out a plan. Stop trying to recreate the wheel. It's done. Embrace reality and embrace victory. Now do it. PIP, I'm hearing there's good things going on there. My friend Erikel. Folks, this coalition needs people speaking truth to power and bringing MMT to the forefront to ensure that these new parties don't accidentally push neoliberalism and austerity because they don't understand. The same thing goes with when we start talking about policies. Instead of just dinking around the edges, stay focused on a new deal. Because I'm telling you right now, a constitutional convention could very well come to be. And there will be many Democrats that sign on for it. And there will be more than enough idiots out there to sign on to a balanced budget amendment that will destroy our economy, and it will be codified into the Constitution. You want to talk about screwing our lives? There you go, brother. There you go, sister. That's the pathway to death. Now, what are you going to do with this knowledge? That's the question. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to sit on it? Are you going to say, well, I don't know enough about this subject to actually tell somebody? Or are you going to write letters to your congressman? Are you going to write letters to your local paper? Are you going to write to your party, your local party, your state party, your national party? Are you going to take to the floor at town halls and demand and make signs and demand? Are you going to block traffic somewhere and make demands? Are you going to occupy your senator's office and make demands? Are you going to occupy the inauguration and demand? Or are you going to sit back and let this happen to our children and say, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. The same thing you would do to go march for enhanced Medicare for all is the same thing you would do for this. The same thing you would do to block the Dakota Access Pipeline, locking arms and standing there and camping out and whatever, is the same thing we should be doing. Think Occupy Wall Street meets knowledge and facts and demands. Boy, what a powerful thing that would be. You want to end neoliberalism? I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. The minute we start federally spending on the people, the minute we put together a robust New Deal, is the minute you and I don't have to go into private debt to sustain our lives. Once we stop doing that, guess what happens? The money to the rich starts dwindling, and it starts being spread amongst us more. All of a sudden, income inequality starts going like this. And then you add a federal job guarantee, and you and I will forever be able to handle the shocks to the economy. We will be able to move. The people that are trapped in these inner city cesspools will be able to go to states that take care of their needs. Folks, it's time to rise up and take direct action. To each one teach one, and never let another Bill Clinton come to office again. Never let another Obama come to office again. Never let another Bush come to office again, and never let another Reagan come to office again. It's in our hands, folks. I don't care how rigged the elections are. I don't care what a farce it is. They cannot stand to see unrest. They cannot stand to see the population rise up peacefully. We don't need guns for this revolution. We need our brains. And we need to make sure that the vote blue sycophants and the Bernie hero worshipers and the Jill sycophants and the Green Party or busters start focusing on economic reality and pushing that to their parties and pushing that to their heroes and pushing it to the other hero worshipers and making sure that we as a movement start filling up stadiums once again like they did in Sacramento with Bernie, but this time talking about a new deal, and it's not me, us. That's the key. Not me, us. Bernie Sanders was very clear. It's not about Bernie Sanders. It's about you all. It's about us. He was right. It is about us. And it's time we make our public servants again. Not heroes, not leaders, but public servants. You will do the bidding of your constituents. So we got to make sure those constituents are knowledgeable so they don't ask for dumb things. I hope you guys learned something tonight. This is a powerful story, one that I often struggled with in the past, but I've given you the straight skinny. If anything you found that I've said tonight offended you in any way, you have my apologies. If anything I said to you tonight struck you as odd, ask questions. If you don't understand how to take action within your communities, please ask us. We'll help you. If you don't understand how to talk to someone about a key issue, we'll give you resources. But don't sit on this knowledge. Do not sit on this knowledge. Share this live stream to your friends. Tell your friends to share it to their friends. Make sure that we make change. I don't do this for myself. I do this for my children. I do this for your children. I'm not here for my own popularity. I could care less. I care about changing the world. I'm grateful that I have a platform, and I'm grateful that good people have given me great knowledge. I'm hoping you take this and run with it. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives, folks. I really hope that you have a great day and that you take this knowledge to the streets. Have a good night, everybody.